People who got away with murder but confessed while dying. Get ready to learn the horrifying secrets that were kept hidden from the murderers who later confessed on their deathbeds. What makes a person bear the burden of their transgressions for years before releasing them in their last moments? In what ways do these admissions change the victims and their families' perceptions of justice? Come along on an unforgettable trip into the depths of the human brain as we uncover the heartbreaking tales of people who admitted their transgressions after there was no longer any chance to turn around. There is a horrifying subclass of incidents in the annals of criminal history where people have committed horrible crimes but have managed to elude justice for years or even decades. However, in an ironic turn of events, a few of these criminals decided to face their inevitable demise and confess to their crimes, letting go of their deepest secrets. Even though it was too late to change the course of events, these confessions illuminated the horrifying depths of human depravity and the eerie psychological effects of unsolved atrocities. Here, we explore the compelling tales of those who, facing mortality, made the decision to face the ghosts of their past and unearth long-buried truths. The Confession of Samuel Little. The tale of Samuel Little spans decades of bloodshed deceit, and it is one of terrifying mystery and morbid fascination. Little was born in Reynolds, Georgia in 1940. His early years were difficult and unstable. He moved about a lot, taking on odd jobs and running afoul of the law from time to time. Little's violent tendencies didn't come to light until the late 1960s, and his first murder was documented in 1970. From that point on, he started a violent rampage that would last for the following 40 years, tearing across the nation and leaving a path of devastation and death in his wake. Little preyed on women who were marginalized and frequently targeted people who he thought would go unnoticed, such as drug users and prostitution workers. He was able to elude law enforcement for years due to his systematic methodology and nomadic lifestyle, which left detectives perplexed by the supposedly random nature of his crimes. Little eluded detection for a while, despite sporadic run-ins with the law and suspicions from others who knew him, until 2012. When DNA evidence connected him to 3 Los Angeles murders. Little started to confess after being presented with a mountain of evidence, which showed the startling scope of his misdeeds. As his health deteriorated in the ensuing years, he kept confessing to killings around the nation, eventually taking credit for more than 90 deaths. Investigators were taken aback by the enormity of his crimes as he revealed disturbing details about his victims and how they died with each terrifying confession. Even while Little's admissions came too late to change the fate of many of his victims, they provided some families with much-needed closure and a window into the thoughts of a cold-blooded murderer. But even in his last days, Little remained a mystery, with his exact intentions and the scope of his crimes still unknown. The last words of Henry Lee Lucas, a man veiled in the deepest shadows of human depravity. Henry Lee Lucas lived a turbulent life full of violence, betrayal, and unspeakable tragedies. Lucas was physically abused by his alcoholic father and abandoned by his mother throughout his early years. He was born into a world of poverty and misery in 1936 Virginia. These turbulent beginnings planted the seeds of bitterness and rage in him, preparing him for the gruesome journey that lay ahead in the years to come. Lucas's disturbed mental state became more and more apparent as he matured into maturity, exhibiting a number of unsettling behaviors and run-ins with the law. Animal torture and small-time crimes were examples of his violent and brutal nature, hinting at the darkness that would finally devour him. But it wasn't until Lucas admitted to killing his young girlfriend, Becky Powell, in the late 1970s that the full extent of his depravity became evident. Despite its shocking ferocity, Lucas's confession would just mark the start of the spiral into notoriety. Lucas started a grim voyage of self-incrimination in the years that followed, confessing to hundreds of deaths that occurred around the country. Lucas's admissions were warmly welcomed by law enforcement, who was keen to put an end to unresolved investigations. He was hailed as one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. However, questions regarding the validity of Lucas's assertions started to surface even as he enjoyed the limelight of celebrity. His story's contradictions, the evidence's inconsistencies, and the potential for law enforcement coercion or manipulation were cited by his detractors. Lucas's reputation loomed big over the criminal court system, casting a veil of doubt and mistrust over the pursuit of justice, notwithstanding the uncertainties surrounding his admissions. As he waited to be executed on death row, Lucas started to retract his earlier admissions and acknowledged that many of them had been made up to arouse pity and attention. Even though he made an effort to correct the record, it is still unclear how much of the atrocities he admitted to he really committed. As a result, individuals who were impacted by his reign of terror are still plagued by fear and confusion. The Deathbed Confession of Wayne Williams, a name that conjures up images of mystery and terror. Wayne Williams was the driving force behind the Atlanta child murders, one of the scariest crime sprees in American history. Williams was raised in the 1970s against a backdrop of racial tension and social unrest, having been born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1958. He showed an early interest in the music business, working as a promoter and producer with the hopes of becoming well-known and successful. However, he had a darker side that would ultimately bring him down. Hidden beneath his endearing exterior, over 22 children and young adults, primarily African Americans, were murdered in a string of killings that shook Atlanta in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The murders shocked the neighborhood and made parents fearful for their children's safety, which led to panic and paranoia. The offender remained elusive despite law enforcement's best attempts, leaving a path of destruction in their wake. Investigators became suspicious of Wayne Williams quickly because of his strange conduct and closeness to the crime locations. Although Williams was never legally accused in relation to the child deaths, he was apprehended and charged in 1981 with the murders of 2 adults, Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne. Williams insisted he was innocent, but he was found guilty and given a life sentence. But when he was imprisoned, Williams started to come clean with a number of startling admissions. He admitted to being involved in at least some of the child deaths in a series of interviews with reporters and investigators. He maintained that he was being set up by law enforcement and forced to confess to crimes he had not committed. When he delivered his confession on his deathbed, it was like a bombshell to the public, rekindling interest in the case and casting doubt on the extent of his actual involvement in the atrocities. Although Williams' confession gave the victim's family some closure, it also highlighted the case's complexity and the potential for injustices to occur. Wayne Williams' death confession serves as a chilling reminder of the elusive nature of truth and the never-ending pursuit of justice, particularly in light of the Atlanta child murders legacy, which continues to throw a long shadow over Atlanta and the larger criminal justice system. The tragic and adversity-filled life story of James Washington creates a striking picture of the intricacies of the human condition. Washington was raised in rural Louisiana in the 1940s and was confronted with many obstacles from a young age. He was exposed to violence and instability as a child, growing up in a setting characterized by social injustice and economic hardship, factors that would profoundly influence his future. But beneath the surface, he had a darkness and a smoldering wrath that was just waiting to explode. When Washington savagely murdered a young woman in a fit of blind rage in the late 1970s, it was the culmination of this simmering rage that eventually broke out into violence. The crime's graphic and horrifying facts left a path of destruction in their wake. Washington nevertheless avoided being apprehended in spite of the gravity of his crimes, and he went on to lead a life mostly free from the repercussions of his transgression. The terrible murder went unresolved for many years, leaving a cold case that tormented the memory of those who were affected by it. Washington, meanwhile, seemed unfazed by the weight of his guilt or the shadow of punishment hanging over him as he went about his business. But as he drew closer to the end of his life, plagued by disease and seeing death as a given, his conscience started to gnaw at him, eroding the defenses he had put up against his guilt. In an unexpected turn of events, Washington revealed the graphic details of the murder that he had been carrying about for so long in a devastating confession to a close friend. Even though it was too late to prosecute him in a court of law, his admission acted as a last-ditch repentance and a last-ditch request for forgiveness before his death. Washington left behind a violent and regretful legacy as he departed, serving as a warning about the devastating force of unbridled rage. His experience is a sobering reminder of the complexity of the human brain and the never-ending need for atonement, even in the most hopeless circumstances. These stories are unsettling reminders of how intricate and frequently unpredictable criminal activity can be. In their last moments, these people had to deal with the fallout from their deeds, even though they tried to avoid going to jail. Although their admissions might have given the victim's family some closure, they also highlighted the terrifying fact that some secrets are meant to be revealed, even after death. We are reminded as we consider these cases how crucial it is to pursue justice for the victims and hold criminals accountable for their crimes, regardless of how long it takes. Subscribe now to explore more intriguing stories of true crime and unravel the mysteries of the human psyche.